In 1945, a woman woke up at midnight to the sound of her front door slowly creaking open. As she opened the door, she was confronted by a stranger standing silently in the middle of her apartment. She demanded he leave, but he had no intention of going quietly. In a sudden burst of violence, the man lunged at her, stabbing her repeatedly before pulling out a gun and finishing what he had started. Though she fought desperately, her efforts weren't enough. She died from her wounds. Then, the killer took her lipstick and scrawled a haunting message on the wall. "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." Despite leaving a bloody fingerprint on the door, the killer vanished without a trace. That is, until 6 months later, when 17-year-old William Hirons was caught during an attempted burglary. Authorities claimed he confessed to 3 brutal murders, including this one, and he was sent to prison. But to this day, many believe he was innocent, framed in a case riddled with corruption and unanswered questions.
A quadruple amputee has been arrested for murder, and people are calling him the US version of Oscar Pistorius. Dayton Webber is a 27-year-old professional athlete from Maryland. Apparently he is world class at cornhole. I have no idea what cornhole even is, but basically when he was really little he had a bacterial infection and this led to sepsis. He ended up having to have his arms and legs amputated just to have some sort of shot at survival. They honestly thought he was going to die. He overcame the odds and actually became a professional athlete. It blew people's minds. But something horrific unfolded very recently on the 22nd of March. Police in the area got a frantic phone call just before 10:30 p.m. Witnesses were like, yeah, we were in the back seat of this car and Dayton was driving and his passenger was a guy called Braddock Wells. The passengers were horrified when all of a sudden they saw Dayton pull out a weapon and shoot Braddock. They couldn't believe what they were hearing when Dayton turned around to them in the back seat and said, "Can you help me get rid of this body?" They told police, they were like, absolutely not. They got out the car and so did Dayton and he legged it out of there. When police heard this, they knew a very dangerous individual was on the loose, armed. They dispatched an army of police officers in vehicles to scour the area and try and hunt him down. Time really was of the essence if this guy had a loaded weapon. As the clock ticked down, it felt like the search began to get more and more frantic, and finally, after 2 hours, they did track Dayton down. He was arrested over 100 miles away in Charlottesville, Virginia. Now, tragically, they did also find someone else, Braddock, and he was deceased. He was lifeless and had just been dumped in someone's yard. Dayton is charged now with first-degree murder among other charges and is awaiting further investigation.
This lady went missing and photos of her were found on the dark web trapped inside of a cage. 33-year-old Cassidy Rainwater was from Missouri and she went missing in July of 2021. All of a sudden, Cassidy stopped contacting loved ones and they started to get worried. At first, her case barely made headlines. No massive search, no national alert, just another woman quietly reported missing. Eventually, police received an anonymous tip from someone who sent them an image. It's a picture allegedly showing a woman believed to be Cassidy, and this person is inside of a cage, malnourished, partially naked, and being treated like an animal. Investigators traced the image back to a man named James Phelps and his friend Timothy Norton. It was revealed that Cassidy had been staying in a rural property in Dallas County, Missouri that was owned by James. When authorities searched the property, what they found confirmed their worst fears. As they were searching the home, they decided to take a look inside of the fridge. They discovered a whole bunch of meat that was packaged and it had a date on it. While others were searching the property, they found human remains, Cassidy's personal belongings, and evidence that she had been held captive, abused, and murdered, but it didn't stop there. Investigators took all of that packaged meat to scan it for DNA, and it matched up with Cassidy's DNA. Online messages were also uncovered between the two men, and they had plans to sell Cassidy's meat on the dark web. Prosecutors believe that Cassidy was being exploited for torture content, her suffering was being documented, and these men thought that they could profit from her. Both James and Timothy were arrested with kidnapping and murder. In 2023, they were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I genuinely have lost sleep over the fact that Madeleine McCann's name was mentioned in the newly released Epstein files. As far as I can tell, it was only mentioned once, and it was about a possible sighting with this woman, who clearly resembles Ghislaine Maxwell. This account has never been verified, but what are the odds? Madeleine's disappearance is already terrifying enough, but then mix in this new information and it takes on a whole new level of disturbing. Because as we know, nothing is ever as it seems. I mean, imagine your 3-year-old child goes missing while on vacation in in a different country. She disappears from her bed in the middle of the night while you and your friends are at dinner nearby. So many witnesses come forward claiming to see either this woman or this man carrying a small child resembling yours away from her bedroom. So you think it'll only be a matter of time before she's found and they're caught. But then that doesn't happen, and then days turn into weeks, which then turn into nearly 2 decades, and she is still missing. So we know that's what happened to Madeline, and there is a primary suspect in her case now. His name is Christian Bruckner. Last year, police revealed that they found some pretty disturbing evidence on his abandoned property, including kids' toys, 75 swimsuits belonging to little girls, and 6 USB sticks and hard drives, which reportedly contain some pretty disturbing evidence and photos that suggest Madeline is dead. But he was released in September of last year after serving time for another SA charge, meaning that whoever took Madeline is still out there. And with this new evidence of her name being mentioned in the Epstein files, I think we should talk about it. Madeline McCann was 3 years old when she mysteriously disappeared on May 3rd, 2007. Her mom and dad, Kate and Jerry, both highly skilled doctors and cardiologists, married in 1998, and in 2003 they had Madeline. They then welcomed twins, a boy and a girl, in 2005, which Madeline was super excited about. On April 28th, 2007, the McCann family, along with 7 of their close friends and their children, went to Praia da Luz, Portugal for a 7-night spring break trip. They all stayed in a group of local apartments known as the Waterside Village. The McCanns were in apartment 5A, and the rest of their friends were kind of scattered around them. It was a nice little 2-bedroom ground floor apartment that lay on the same property as the very popular Ocean Club Resort. They specifically chose this apartment/location because almost every night of their trip, Jerry and Kate, along with their friends, would often eat dinner at the tapas restaurant in the resort, while their kids slept unattended back at the apartments. From the restaurant, you could basically see the top half of the apartments, so the adults all kind of thought that it was safe enough to leave the kids alone while they dined at the nearby restaurant. In addition to being close to the resort, which was about 180 feet away, the McCanns reportedly always kept the front door locked, which was right next to their kids' bedroom. Madeline and her younger siblings all shared a room, with Madeline being on her own bed and the twins in a cot in the middle of the room. The bedroom also only had one waist-high window with curtains and a metal exterior shutter that could only be opened from the inside, and the McCanns kept this shut during their entire trip. Madeline slept opposite to this window. So with all of these precautions in place, they felt safe enough to leave Madeline and the twins sleeping in their beds alone while they went to dinner nearby. This brings us to May 3rd, 2007. The day started out great like usual. The kids went to the resort's kids club, and then they all met up for lunch and a swim in the pool. This is the last photo ever taken of 3-year-old Madeline, as she would disappear later that night. So Kate and Jerry put the kids to bed around 7 that night. They recalled Madeline sleeping peacefully in her light pink Eeyore pajamas with her favorite blanket and stuffed animal. At around 8:30 p.m., Kate and Jerry left to go eat dinner at the resort's tapas restaurant with their friends. Like I said, they felt safe leaving the kids alone because it was a pretty close walk, and you could see part of the apartments from the restaurant, but you couldn't see the front door. And although generally speaking it was a close walk, you still had to walk along a narrow public street just to reach the doors of the Ocean Club Resort. And then you had to walk through the resort to the other side of the pool just to get to the restaurant. So honestly, it really wasn't a straightforward walk. For the last 4 nights of the trip, the resort staff had reserved the same table at the same time for the McCanns and their friends. And they left a note to make sure this happened, saying they all had their kids sleeping alone in the apartments. Jerry and Kate and the rest of their friends would all take turns checking on their kids every 30 minutes. And to make it easy, they left the sliding glass patio doors unlocked and the curtains drawn so that they could sneak in without waking them up. The first check was from Jerry at 9:05 p.m., and he said that Madeline and the twins were sleeping just fine, but initially he had left their bedroom door almost all the way closed. But now, for some reason, it was wide open. Before he left, he cracked it once again and then went back to the restaurant. At around 9:30 p.m., it was Kate's turn to check on her kids, but one of their friends named Matthew offered to do it for her since he also had to go and check on his. Matthew noticed when checking on the McCann's kids that their bedroom door was once again wide open, but he didn't hear them, so without fully checking to see if they were okay and in their beds, he just cracked the door and left. Then 10 p.m. hits, and this is when Kate goes to check. Kate also went through the unlocked sliding glass patio door and also noticed the bedroom door was wide open, but when she went to close it, it slammed shut because of a breeze. When she opened it, she realized that the window in the kids' bedroom was now open, and Madeline was gone. The twins were still sound asleep in their beds, and Madeline's blanket and stuffy were still on her bed, but she was nowhere to be found. Kate then ran back to the restaurant screaming, quote, "Madeline is gone. Someone's taken her," end quote. Within 30 minutes, the police were notified, and the resort had activated its missing child search protocol. For several hours, volunteers and members of the resort staff searched, along with police. But it was like Madeline vanished into thin air. At first, it was assumed that maybe she just wandered off, but it soon became clear that that was not the case. There were so many people searching for Madeline that it didn't matter where you were in the village. You could hear her name being called. This search was intense, and it involved police bringing in tracking dogs and searching waterways, wells, caves, sewers, and the ruins around Praia de Luz, but still, nothing was found. Then, one of the McCann's friends came forward and reported seeing a suspicious man about 45 minutes before Madeline disappeared. And it was this sighting that really changed the direction of this investigation. So on the night of Madeline's disappearance, one of the family's friends named Jane Tanner took her turn to go and check on her child just after 9 p.m. On her way back to the restaurant about 15 minutes later, she recalled seeing a man carrying a child walk in front of her, and it looked like he came from the front of apartment 5A, not far from Madeline's bedroom. It didn't register at the time, but the child looked eerily similar to Madeline and was even wearing similar-looking PJs. Jane described this man as having a European or Mediterranean appearance, dark hair, about 5'7", and looked to be about 35 to 40 years old. She said this man did not look like a tourist. This sighting became known as the Tanner sighting. This gave police at least a possible timeline of Madeline's disappearance. Ultimately, though, the Portuguese police deemed this sighting as a red herring, and they concluded that the man Jane saw was likely just another tourist on vacation who had picked up his child from the resort's nighttime daycare. And yes, I know what you're gonna say. I don't know why the McCanns didn't utilize the nighttime daycare instead of just leaving their kids unattended, but I guess this man's daughter also had similar PJs to Madeline's, and after mimicking the same pose with the same type of outfit, authorities stated that they're almost certain that this sighting was not related to her abduction. After this, though, another possible sighting was reported, which did hold some weight. This became known as the Smith sighting after the last name of the couple who reported it. At around 10 p.m., the couple reported seeing a man about 500 yards from apartment 5A carrying a little girl who they thought was around 3 or 4 years old. She looked strikingly similar to Madeline, and this man was carrying her towards the beach. This man looked to be in his 30s, around 5'7", with a slim build, had short brown hair, and again did not look like a tourist. The couple said this man seemed uncomfortable carrying this child like she wasn't his, and what you're looking at are the digital composite sketches of this man. So police started questioning if this was a planned abduction or a burglary gone wrong. Apartment 5A was accessible to the public from two sides, one being the sliding glass door that was left unlocked, which anyone from the public street could walk into. All you had to do was open a small gate and walk up a set of stairs to get into the living room. The other was the front door, which was supposedly locked, and there were no signs of forced entry. The window in Madeline's bedroom was a really big point of contention because it could only be opened from the inside. And again, there were no signs of forced entry there either. But the window did overlook the walkway and the parking lot, which was separated from the street by a low wall. Anyone off the street could walk back there. There were a lot of odd sightings of sketchy men kind of casing the house. And in the weeks leading up to Madeline's disappearance, the neighborhood experienced a lot of burglaries. And on top of this, that exact apartment 5A, had been broken into before, with the most recent being the guest that rented it right before the McCanns. So this was a real possibility that Madeline was the victim of a planned abduction. But then Portuguese police started looking at Jerry and Kate, Madeline's parents. And this was for a few reasons. Their stories had a lot of inconsistencies in the beginning, including their friends' accounts of what happened. One major question was why Kate felt comfortable leaving her twins alone after discovering that Madeline was kidnapped, instead of just calling for help. Police then brought in sniffer dogs to search apartment 5A. When they searched the apartment, the dogs alerted to an area behind the sofa in the living room, the closet in the main bedroom, on Madeline's stuffy, and on some of Kate's clothes. They also found a small bloody footprint in the apartment. But after forensic testing, Portuguese authorities couldn't determine whose blood it was, and the results were inconclusive. It could have been there long before Madeline's abduction. Then the sniffer dogs were taken to a parking lot with about 30 cars, including the McCann's car that they had rented 25 days after her disappearance. The dogs then alerted to the outside of the McCann's car by the driver's side door and again in the trunk. Forensic tests then found traces of what they initially thought was Madeline's blood and hair in the trunk, and because of this, they were listed as possible suspects. But analysis of this blood and hair sample were also inconclusive. I guess guess the evidence they found was too faint and complex to be able to say who it came from, and some suspect that it could be from Kate or even the twins' belongings. But back then, police started really honing in on the McCanns. Authorities believe that Madeline likely died in the apartment accidentally, and they believed that her parents sedated her to get her to sleep through the night. But their theory was that they gave her too much medication, which ended up killing her. They kind of used Kate's job as a doctor with a background in anesthetics to fuel this theory. They then suspected that they hid her body for a month before officially disposing of it using the rental car. But ultimately, there wasn't any additional evidence linking her parents to the crime, and eventually they were cleared. They've never been charged in connection to Madeline's disappearance. Over the years, there have been many people of interest, but sadly, her case would fall cold. Then, in 2020, a new primary suspect was named, Christian Bruckner. He is a 49-year-old convicted sex offender who was in the area when Madeline disappeared. He was in prison on an unrelated SA charge, but he was released in September of last year, which is crazy. He has a lengthy criminal history, mainly involving children. In 2016, police searched an abandoned factory on one of his properties, and last year they released what they found. They discovered a hard drive containing disturbing messages, including a Skype chat where he said he wanted to, quote, capture something small and use it for days. End quote. He wrote horrifying fantasies about children, too. Then police found 75 little girl swimsuits, kids' toys, chemicals, and most disturbing of all, they found 6 USB hard drives and memory cards, which showed horrible photos of child abuse. They found these hard drives buried underneath his deceased dog, and one of the hard drives reportedly contained evidence that suggests Madeline is dead. What exactly it showed hasn't been confirmed, but it does not look good. Christian reportedly even confessed and bragged about abducting Madeline and said she, quote, didn't even scream. End quote. Phone records place him in the area when she disappeared, and what's incredibly disturbing is that just 2 years before Madeline disappeared, he SA'd a 75-year-old woman in the exact same town where Madeline went missing. He was convicted of that in 2019 and served a 7-year sentence, but like I said, he was released for that in September of last year. Even after what he did and all of the evidence against him in Madeline's case, police say that he's under heavy surveillance, but it is so scary to think that this dangerous of a man is just walking free in society right now. I can almost guarantee that he will strike again, and probably soon. As of right now, he is still a primary suspect in this case, and authorities did find some pretty damning evidence, but apparently not enough, because as of today, he has yet to be charged in connection to Madeline's disappearance. Although we don't know what exactly happened to her, police believe that she is likely dead and that Christian Bruckner is somehow responsible. This case gained national attention, and it's the most heavily reported missing person case in modern history. But even so, Madeline is still missing. It's crazy to me that within a 30-minute time frame, someone took her and made her disappear forever. And now with the new release of the Epstein files and her name specifically being mentioned, it makes me wonder what actually happened to her. The witness in the document stated they saw who they believed was Madeline with this woman, who clearly resembles Ghislaine Maxwell. So I guess I'm just putting this out there because it's only widely known that she was seen with 2 possible men that night, but now it could be possible that she was seen with a woman. This woman, which is terrifying. And I thought the world was evil before all this stuff about the island came out, but now I genuinely think that we don't even know how bad it actually is. But it's now been 19 years, and whatever really happened to Madeline that night remains a mystery.
This mom helped her son get rid of his pregnant girlfriend. Emily Peguero was born on July 12th of 2001 and was from the Dominican Republic. She was described as loving, kind, and just beautiful. Just across the street from her lived Marlon Martinez, who she would often hang out with. Marlon was born in New York in 1998 and was raised by his mother and stepfather in the Dominican Republic. Although they were neighbors, they lived in 2 different worlds. Emily's family lived in a very small home, struggling to take care of her and her siblings, while Marlon's home was a grand modern villa. It had a gate and a large front garden since his mom worked in politics. His family could afford expensive gifts, and they were able to send him to an expensive school out of town. Once Emily turned 15 years old and Marlon was 18 years old, they started to date, and once she turned 16 and he was 19, Emily found out she was pregnant. At first, Emily was very scared, but she decided to keep the baby. However, Marlon's mother was not happy about this because she was scared it was going to affect the family's reputation since her son had got someone pregnant that's poor. On August 23rd of 2017, Emily is now 5 months pregnant and she is expecting a baby boy. On that day around 8:30 a.m., Emily and Marlon have plans to go to the clinic to pick up lab results. Around 11:25 a.m., Emily texts her sister that she is going to be dropped off at a gas station because she has plans to meet up with one of her uncles. Her family thought this was really strange because she didn't use text, she always used voice message, and who was this uncle that she was supposedly meeting up with? Since they are neighbors with Madelon, they saw when he arrived home, so the sister goes to approach him to ask where her sister is. Madelon stated that when they went to the clinic, Emily had gotten the dates wrong and they weren't able to get the results. As they were heading back home, he stated that Emily asked if he could drop her off at a gas station because she was going to be meeting up with her uncle and that uncle would be dropping her off at home. Emily's family found this very odd, so they headed over to that gas station to see if anyone had saw her. Once the family asked for surveillance footage, there was no sign of Emily or Madelon. Things were not adding up, so Emily's mom called police to report her as missing. Right away, Emily's family felt like Madelon and his mother Marlene had something to do with this. Her family knew one thing for sure, and it was that Marlene was not happy about the pregnancy at all, and she probably did something to Emily and the baby. So to address these rumors, Madelon and his mother Marlene held a press conference in their living room. In the footage, Madelon is asking Emily to return home, and Marlene is just stating that everything is a lie and they had nothing to do with her disappearance. Marlene also messes up by saying Emily in past tense, so she has to correct herself. But despite this at-home press conference, people were not convinced. On August 26 of 2017, Madelon ended up turning himself in, and a few days later, his mother turned herself in as well, and they were arrested. Reporters were asking Marlene if she helped with Emily's disappearance, and all she was saying was that she was acting like a mother, not an accomplice. On August 31st, a suitcase was found on the side of the road about an hour away from where Emily lived. Once that suitcase was opened, it was revealed that Emily was inside and she had trauma to her abdomen and skull. It was revealed that on the day the two were supposed to go to the clinic, Madelon never took her there. Instead, he took her to his mom's empty apartment and he forced Emily to drink an unknown liquid that was supposed to get rid of her baby. But it didn't go as planned. Emily was bleeding a lot and she started to fight off Madelon. So he pushed her, she then fell and hit her head. Then surveillance footage captured Madelon carrying Emily's body in a sack. After this, he called his mother Marlene to come help and cover everything up, and of course, she agreed. Madelon was sentenced to 30 years in prison, and Marlene was originally sentenced to 5 years in prison, but later it got reduced to 2 years.
This woman finds out that her husband has been murdered, but it turns out that she planned the entire thing. So it's October 2008, and a 26-year-old woman named Dahlia is living in South Florida and working as a call girl, which is basically how she's been paying for all of her bills at this point in her life. And one random night, she gets a call from a client who wants her to come over to his townhouse while his wife is away on a trip out of town. So she hops in her car, drives over to the guy's place, walks up to the front door, knocks, and this man named Mike opens it up and is just standing there looking at her. Mike is 37 years old, charming, and carries himself with a specific type of confidence that only really comes from having money. But what Dahlia has absolutely no idea about yet is that underneath all of that charm and confidence, Mike is actually a convicted fraudster who served real time in prison for scamming investors out of their money, and he's currently on probation all the way until 2032. Now, at first, things between them are genuinely awkward. Like, I'd imagine doing it with somebody that you don't really know. But it was also because they're both doing something that they really shouldn't be doing in the first place. For Mike, he has been married for like 7 years or so. And for Dahlia, her main job is working as a real estate agent, but she hasn't made a lot of money from that, so she's been secretly doing this on the side. And it isn't really something that she likes to brag to the world about. But then something happens that neither of them is expecting at all, because they actually start talking to each other, like really genuinely talking. And there is just this weird, unexpected connection between them, almost like two people who recognize something in each other that they can't quite explain. And so what was supposed to be one night of business turned into them secretly seeing each other way more than that, to the point where it honestly felt less like a transaction and more like they were actually dating each other. And then just 2 weeks after that first night, Michael's wife comes back from her trip, and Mike basically looks at her and tells her straight up that he is moving out and that he wants a divorce. Just like that. After the divorce was completely finalized, Mike gets down on one knee and proposes to Dahlia with a $20,000 engagement ring. And Dahlia is staring at this rock and thinking, oh my gosh, this is literally the ticket to the kind of life that I've been chasing. So she says yes, obviously, and pretty quickly after that, they get married and Dahlia moves herself right into Mike's $250,000 townhouse. And from the outside, it genuinely looked like everything was working out for them. Dahlia is leaving Mike these really cute little love notes all around the house with things written on them like, I'm the happiest I've ever been, love you now, always and forever. But that sweet honeymoon phase between them doesn't last very long at all, because just 1 month into the marriage, Dahlia has completely made up her mind that she hates Mike and no longer wants to be in a relationship with him anymore. But here's the problem. Dahlia is smart enough to realize that if she just ups and leaves Mike, then she is going to walk away with basically nothing and go right back to being exactly where she was before any of this happened. And that's when it sort of hit her like, wait a minute, what if Mike just wasn't here anymore? Like, if he died in some kind of accident, she'd inherit everything he'd owned, the house, the money, all of it, and she would never have to worry about going back to her old life ever again. And so that became the plan, except the problem was actually figuring out how to make it happen without anyone being able to trace any of it back to her. So she starts trying all kinds of bizarre ways to unalive him. First, she tries to poison him with antifreeze. She's secretly pouring a lot into his coffee, hoping that he'll just die quietly and everyone will think it was due to like natural causes or something. And sure enough, Mike gets extremely sick from it, like completely bedridden for days, and Dahlia's taking care of him, like, oh baby, what's wrong? But somehow Mike doesn't die from it. Now, most people, if they try to poison someone and it didn't work, they would probably take that as a sign from the universe to, I don't know, stop and never try it again. But Dahlia just moves on to what she has apparently already decided is going to be plan B, which is getting Mike arrested and sent back to prison so that he'll be locked away for a very long time without her having to do anything more extreme than the antifreeze. She knows that Mike is on probation and that if he violates it in literally any way at all, he will be going back to prison for a very serious amount of time. So she starts making anonymous calls to police claiming that he is dealing drugs. She even goes as far as physically planting illegal substances inside of his cigarette box so that if police ever search him or pull him over, they will find exactly what she told them to look for. And so one evening when the two of them are driving home together from a restaurant, they get pulled over by a cop, and randomly they search the car and find exactly what Dahlia has put into his cigarettes just a few days before. And Mike starts crying and pleading with the officer like, sir, these are not mine. I don't know how those got there. And somehow the officers actually believed him and they let him go without arresting him, which was the last thing that Dahlia needed to happen after all the work that she had just put into setting this thing up. But on the drive home, Mike starts really thinking hard about everything that has happened, and he pretty quickly realizes that the only person in the world who knew that they were going to that specific restaurant was Dahlia. So he just comes right out and asks her directly while they are still in the car together, did you plant those substances on me? And rather than actually answering the question, Dahlia grips the steering wheel and floors the gas pedal until the car is going 100 miles per hour down the road. And Mike is so terrified for his life that in that moment he just immediately backs off and starts apologizing, telling her he's so sorry. And eventually Dahlia slows the car back down and they go home like nothing has happened. Now by this point, Dahlia knows that even though Mike dropped the conversation in the car, the suspicion still isn't gone. Mike was slowly catching on and she needed a way to get him to let his guard down. So she tells him she's pregnant, like out of the blue. Oh, by the way, we're having a baby. And Mike, he just melts. He is so excited and started talking about future baby names. Except there is no baby. This was just a way to distract him and buy herself more time to figure out her next move, which was to hire a professional hitman who can actually get the job done the right way. And to do that, she was going to need someone who could connect her to the right kind of person. So she pulls out her phone and she calls one of her ex-boyfriends named Muhammad, and she asks him if they can meet up and talk about something really important. And so the next day they meet up and Dahlia starts telling Muhammad this whole story about how Mike is physically abusive and controlling her, and that she desperately needs to find a way to get out of this marriage as quickly as possible. And then she asks him, completely straight-faced and dead serious, whether he knows someone who would be willing to unalive someone for money. And Muhammad just sat there staring at her like, what? You're joking, right? I mean, it wasn't exactly the conversation that he expected to have when she asked to meet up with him, but he was so shocked to see that this wasn't a joke. Dahlia was being dead serious. But he calmly just tells her, no, sorry, I don't know anyone who could help you with that. Dahlia, who at this point was just disappointed, got up and walked away, saying that she would just find someone else. But then a few days go by and Dahlia gets a call from Muhammad, and he tells her that he's actually found someone who's willing to take out her husband. But he does say that the guy's gonna gonna need $1,200 up front to cover the cost of the equipment, meaning the weapon. And so Dahlia meets up with him again, and she hands him the money along with photographs of Mike so that the hitman can know who the target is. And Muhammad's like, okay, I'll send you over the information of the hitman whenever he's ready. So a couple of days after that, Muhammad texts her and tells her to go meet the hitman at this CVS parking lot at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And so Dahlia gets in her car and she drives over there to negotiate the terms of her husband's murder. And as she's sitting in the CVS parking lot waiting, this extremely flashy red convertible pulls in and parks, which is genuinely one of the least inconspicuous vehicles you could possibly choose to drive to a murder for hire meeting. But anyways, the driver rolls down his window and signals for her to come over. So Dahlia gets in the passenger seat and immediately she's like, okay, how are we gonna do this? And the hitman lays the whole thing out. He's like, Wednesday morning, I'll break into the house, put 2 bullets into Mike's head, break some windows here and there, and make the whole thing look like a robbery gone wrong. And Dahlia is just sitting there nodding along like, ooh, that's good. Ooh, I like that. Like, this is just another errand that she's running. Then she hands over the security codes to the house and tells him that she's gonna be at the gym that morning, so she will definitely have a solid alibi when everything goes down. And then the hitman's like, listen, once this starts, you cannot change your mind. Do you understand me? Like, you cannot call this off. And Dahlia looks him dead in the eyes and says, there is no changing my mind. I am determined already. I'm positive. I'm like 5,000% sure. That's literally what she said, by the way. Like, is that not batshit crazy? So they work out the payment, which ends up being a total of $7,000. And on top of that, Dahlia puts her $20,000 engagement ring as extra collateral. The exact ring that Mike got down on one knee to give her. And it's now being used to fund his own murder. And then she just hops out of that red convertible and goes back to her car, genuinely excited that by Wednesday morning, Mike is going to be gone and her life is finally going to become what she has always wanted it to be. So Wednesday morning comes and Dahlia wakes up. She gets herself dressed, walks over to Michael and gives him a kiss. And she tells him that she'll bring him back a Starbucks on her way home from the gym, knowing full well there is no later. She drives herself to the gym and starts her workout like everything is completely normal, making sure to be as visible to as many people as possible so that her alibi can be as airtight when police start asking questions about where she was. And then her phone starts ringing and she immediately picks it up and the voice on the other end says in a very serious tone, "Ma'am, this is Sergeant Frank Ramsey with the Boynton Police Department. There has been a very serious incident involving your husband and you need to come home immediately." So she rushes back to her neighborhood as fast as she can, and when she turns onto her street, she sees police cars everywhere, lights flashing in every direction, yellow crime scene tape everywhere, and officers standing around like something very serious just happened here. She parks, gets out, and an officer walks up to her with this super serious look on his face and says,
"We had a report of a disturbance at your house and there were shots fired. Is your husband Michael?" "Okay, I'm sorry to tell you, ma'am, he's been killed." He's been killed, ma'am. I'm sorry.
No, he's not.
Listen.
No.
Try to calm down.
No.
Listen, right now we need to get you to the station.
No.
We need to get you to our police station. I can't let
At this point, everyone still has the same question. Who would want Mike dead? So detectives decide to bring Dahlia down to the station and sit her down in an interrogation room to hopefully get the question answered. And this detective sits across from her and he says, "Listen, is there anyone that you think would want to hurt your husband?" And Dahlia, putting on the performance of her life, tells him about his probation, about the people that he scammed in the past who might want revenge, about his history with alcohol and substances, basically just listing off all of the negative things about Mike. But the detectives were finding it a bit weird that her husband has supposedly just been murdered and the first thing that your mind goes to is building a case for why someone else might have wanted him dead, which is not exactly normal grieving spouse behavior they're used to seeing, by the way. And at one point, the detectives even make a little joke and they say something like, "Well, I hope you don't want him dead." And I was like, what? No way. Anyways, after a while, the detectives step out and bring in a man in handcuffs. And it's the guy from the red convertible, the hitman. And the detective asks, "Hey, do you recognize this man?" And Dahlia looks directly at him, the man she sat in the car and planned a murder with. And she goes, "No, I've never seen him before. And the detective asks the hitman, why were you seen coming out of Mike's home? But the hitman just stood there staring at the ground and refused to speak. So they just take the hitman out of the room, but then the detective says something that quite literally makes Dahlia's heart drop. The detective says, Dahlia, you are going to jail today for the solicitation of murder. You're under arrest. And then he points to the door where the hitman was standing and he says, that's an undercover police officer. So it turns out that after Dahlia first approached Muhammad about finding someone to unalive her husband, Muhammad was scared enough by how serious she clearly was that he went straight to the police and told them everything. He was worried that if something actually happened to Michael and it ever came out that Dahlia had come to him first and he had done nothing about it, he could end up facing serious criminal charges of his own for not reporting it. And the police at first were genuinely skeptical because this is a very extraordinary thing for someone to just come in off the street and tell you. But they hired Muhammad up anyways and they sent him to talk to her just to see what would happen. And they watched from the other side of the wire as Dahlia confirmed to the hitman with zero hesitation that she wanted her husband dead and that she was 5,000% sure about it. So on that Wednesday morning when Dahlia left for the gym, police immediately went to the house, knocked on the door, and Michael answered it, still half asleep and completely confused as to why there were a whole bunch of officers standing at his door before sunrise. And they just told him everything, that his wife had spent weeks planning his murder, had hired someone to come to his house that morning and shoot him in the head, and that the whole entire thing had been a sting operation the entire time. They went inside and staged the entire house to look like a real crime scene, made the call to Dahlia, and then brought her in and let the whole thing play out exactly the way I just told you. As you could probably imagine, Mike was absolutely livid when he found out. But what hurt him the most was the fact that it wasn't like a, oh, kill him softly, make it painless. It was more like a just blow the guy's brains out, as if their whole relationship was just a flat out lie. Damn. That's deep. In the end, Dahlia was sentenced to 16 years in prison, and her current release date is actually set for the year 2032, which is kind of funny because if you remember, that is the exact same year that Michael's original probation was supposed to finally end. I don't know about you guys, but the audacity of this woman is unbelievable. I will catch you in my next video. Group hug.
Do you believe in reincarnation? Well, what about the 4-year-old that told her parents she missed her children and she wanted to go home? In 1930, a 4-year-old girl named Shanti Davy refused to eat the food her mother made her. And then when her mother asked her what's wrong, she told her mom, that's not how you make it. Her mother laughed and said, how would you know? And she said, I cook for my husband and my children all the time. Her parents looked at each other like, what is wrong with this baby? But as the days went by, she continued to describe her other life. She described a house in Mathura, a city that was 90 miles away, a small clothing shop that her husband owned, 3 children that were hers, neighbors' names, and the streets that she had never visited before. She kept asking her parents, when can we go home? I miss my children. Looking down at this 4-year-old child, her parents thought she might be becoming mentally ill, so they took her to the doctor. But when the doctor evaluated her, he said that there was nothing wrong with her, except he didn't know why she was making up these stories. By the time she was 7, Shanti's stories became even more elaborate. She described the details of the interior of a home that she had never seen. And then she spoke about giving birth, details that no 7-year-old child should ever know. She said she was in so much pain and she was trying to stay so that she could see her children one more time. But after the baby came, everything just went dark. She died right after she gave birth. After hearing the details of her incredible stories, when Shanti was 10, her teacher came up with a bright idea. She decided to write to the man that Shanti was describing at that same address that she said to ask him if the details of her stories were true. Did he really have a shop? And did he have a wife that died 10 years earlier? A few weeks later, the teacher received a reply in the mail, and she could not believe what she read. The man said that yes, his name was Pandit. He did own a small clothing shop, and yes, he had 3 children and a wife who had died 10 years earlier, the same year that Shanti was born. Shanti's parents were shocked. Could this really just be a coincidence? Shanti's former husband, Pandit, couldn't believe the letter he received either, and he decided to make a test by sending his cousin over to Shanti's family's house to see if the girl would recognize him. Pandit's cousin made the trip to Shanti's family's home, and when he knocked on the door and introduced himself as Pandit, Shanti's former husband, she looked at him and said, "You're not my husband, you're his cousin." The cousin went back and told her former husband, Pandit, something strange is going on. So Pandit decided to make an unannounced visit to Shanti's house himself. Made the trip to her city without telling her he was coming. And when he knocked on the door, Shanti answered it and she ran straight to him, but then she stopped herself as though she was remembering that she was still in the little girl's body. She looked over at him and said, "You came, I knew you would." As Pandit continued to visit Shanti and her family, Shanti was very excited to prepare his favorite food just the way he liked it. She even talked about their children by name and mentioned private arguments that the two had that nobody knew about.
So Katie Coleman, a beautiful 10-year-old girl, goes missing in a small knit town in Indiana. It's 2005, DNA is in its infancy, and everyone's looking, agencies, neighbors, one of those small knit towns where everybody comes together to find their own, and nobody can find her. 5 days go by. Fortunately, they find the 10-year-old girl dead in a lake where she was bound and drowned. At first, they had no idea who would do this. Everybody knows everybody. It doesn't make sense. The dad is in tears, crying. He's a broken man. His quote was, "Not only did I lose my daughter, but I lost my best friend." You could just see the pain in his body, a shell of a man. At first, they find a guy named Chucky, a local meth head, meth dealer, and they're investigating him. Out of paranoia, he calls 911 and admits to doing the case. He says he was doing a drug deal with his friend, and she came there and they wanted to scare her. They tied her up and she accidentally fell in the lake after they bounded her up and she drowned. And the more they talked to him, they realized he was full of shit. And the dad, the family all thought they had the killer. This was 6 months, and they realized this guy just lied. And they let him go after doing DNA tests and realizing he didn't know anything about the case. The reality of the case was this little girl was raped, bound, beaten, and thrown into a river like a piece of trash where she ultimately drowned. Well, like I said, DNA was in its infancy stage, and they found on her body and a cigarette butt matching DNA. But it wasn't a Chucky. It was of a traveling man named Anthony Stockholm. He wasn't from there. He hardly ever been there. He was helping his wife visit some family, move, and was passing through. This sick fuck finds this little girl, kidnaps her, rapes her, and discards her in the river like trash. And you know what this coward does? He tells him, "I did it because my father died and I wasn't in the right frame of mind. He was sick." Man, shut the fuck up. My dad died. You know what I did? I raised my son. I worked my ass off and was there for my father during his death, my family during his death, while still being a parent, a man, and a leader. So of course, when it comes to trial, they say, "Shut the fuck up, Anthony." They want to kill him, put the needle in him. He's scared. He admits to the crime. The family doesn't want to go through a trial and relive the moment for the third time. So he takes life without parole and 30 years for the rape. Fast forward a year, this demonic fucking predator ends up in a prison called Wabash Correctional Institution, a level 3, level 4 prison in Indiana. What are the chances that while he's in there, a cousin of the victim, Katie, is in that same prison? His name is Jared Harris. Now, he's doing 20 years for a burglary that he did when he was 16. Think about that. The man that killed his cousin is doing life, but they gave him 30 years for the rape of a 10-year-old. He's doing 10 less years than a rapist killer if he would have never got caught for the murder. That's how sick this fucking world is. That's why the universe takes care of itself. So, like any good family member, any good man, he took the trash out for us. He states he was at visitation and he told his mom, "This motherfucker's here." She said, "Please don't catch an MIP, a murder in prison, and get another 50, 60 years. Torment him, hurt him, whatever it takes. but do not catch a murder. They didn't say because we want you to come home. They said because we do not want him to get off easy. Torture him. Do not give him the easy way out. So by accident, he gets moved into the same pod as this demonic chomo motherfucker, Anthony Stockelman, piece of shit. Now, Harris is in there and he's trying to figure out a way to hit his ass up. Prison's funny like that, all you chomo motherfuckers. He ended up in the same prison as his victim's cousin, 2 cells away. So with those accidents happening, just 2 cells away from your victim's cousin, the victim that you brutally raped and murdered and let drown in a river like a piece of trash. So Harris is trying to figure out a plan. His family doesn't want him to kill him, not for the greater good, but because that's too easy for this chomo. So a lot of times, chomos, pedophiles, they're getting extorted, beaten, sexually assaulted. I mean, their life is hell on earth. Killing them is doing them a favor. So the guy that's his war daddy, that's beating him, extorting his family on the streets, steps to Harris and says, look, bro, you know, this is my boy, but what he did to your family, I'm gonna help you hit his ass up. So Harris goes in the cell. He's got a giant knife on him, a bone crusher, piece of rebar sharpened like a fucking Spartan spear. Sneaks in his cell. As soon as the chomo enters it, he looks at him like with fear in his eyes. He pulls it out and says, what's up? Let's talk for a second. Goes over his paperwork with him, makes him read everything to him. Dude got crocodile tears, the chomo that is. Finally, he pulls out the knife, says, look, I'm gonna give you this tattoo. Pulls out an old rusty tattoo gun with an unsharpened needle. Now to give you an idea how it goes in prison is all my tattoos are prison ink. And you sharpen a lighter spring, and a lot of times we'll run the tattoo with just a bloodline in case we get knocked off. The pattern's there, we didn't waste any ink, and that way when I get out of confinement, we could finish it. Nothing is worse than the bloodline, especially if the needle is not sharpened and is put on your forehead with force, pain, and you just got a fucking ass whooping. So Harris talks to him, lets him know this is what it's gonna be. I'm gonna tattoo you. He starts saying, put it on my shoulder. Harris snaps, starts beating the dog shit out of him. Dude goes into the fetal position because we know these chomos do nothing when a man or someone that can hold their own confronts him but cry and beg. And boom, in opens the cell. It's his war daddy that he pays protection to and gives up that booty to. He goes, you all right? And the chomo says, no. He goes, motherfucker, I'm not talking to you. Harris, hurry up. I got the door. Harris continues to beat on him, grabs his head, takes a dry needle with the electric motor on it and carves in his head Katie's revenge on his forehead. Right there, as you can see. They make the dude hide for 3 days, the chomo, as he has a patch on his head. Finally, the officers see it. They figure out what happened. They end up giving Harris outside charges. Right before they go to trial, the chomo forgets everything. Charges are dropped. Harris goes home after finishing his 20-year sentence. After that, they made it a rule that he cannot cover that tattoo up, and anybody that does, they will get stabbed up for it. Since Harris went home, he's not only had that tattoo added to, he's been stabbed, beaten, extorted. His family's been extorted. Everywhere he goes, Katie's revenge. And it's mandatory politics in that prison. If anybody touches that tattoo, you will be stabbed. Now that's a sex offender registry. All you chomo motherfuckers. When I was in prison, when we would see sick motherfuckers like that, and we would know some of the victims, or we would just know what kind of fucking evil shit they did, we would do what's called a razor tag. And not laser tag, razor tag. Just slice them with a razor, burnt into a toothbrush to mark every single one of them. Some dudes would write letters on them, try to get them 4 or 5 times. We call that the prison sex offender registry. Just leave our kids alone. Whether you beat the system out here, I promise you, you will not beat the system in here. You are used to getting over on vulnerable people in our society, hurting and raping women and children, getting over on the system that fails these kids. But one thing that happens, you will not get over on the corrections officers and the convicts. You will have that same tattoo, those same X's, and you will never remove it off your face until your body is decaying in earth. Leave our kids alone. Stay out. Stay free. Us.
This is the craziest case of catfishing I've ever seen. In 2015, 22-year-old Nathaniel meets 42-year-old Linda. They hit it off and start dating, and before long, they move in together. Now, Linda had 5 adult children and 5 grandchildren, some who lived with her when Nathaniel moved in, and they really liked him at first. But Linda's family starts to notice some red flags with Nathaniel, like his obsession with firearms, his violent outburst, and his quick temper. Linda found out Nathaniel was a serial cheater, but she stayed with him anyway. So fast forward 6 years, it's 2021, and the couple are now engaged. Nathaniel is now working a security job, and that's where he meets a co-worker named Zoraida. They become friends, and eventually they start an affair. Now, Zoraida was married to a man named Alberto, who she had been with for over 10 years, and they had 2 beautiful children who were 7 and 9 years old. While Zoraida did have feelings for Nathaniel, she loved her family more and knew she would never walk out on them. So during their affair, that's when Nathaniel starts receiving these weird messages from someone that we'll call the Bulgarian woman. Now, this woman claims that she's in the Bulgarian mafia, she's watching Nathaniel, and she knows his every move. So the Bulgarian woman sent Nathaniel proof that she knew his location, what kind of truck he drove, where he worked, his fiance's name, his mistress, everything. So the Bulgarian woman tells Nathaniel that she can help him become a member of the mafia, and they start talking online every day. Then someone messages Zoraida and tells her that she better leave Nathaniel alone because he's dangerous and a cheater. All these fake accounts keep messaging her, and they won't tell her who they are, so she blocks them. Then Alberto gets a text that says, "Look, your wife is cheating on you with a man named Nathaniel. He's connected to the mafia. He's very dangerous, and if this affair don't stop, they'll murder your children. They will take them out." And Alberto became enraged, like, "Don't threaten my children. They're just innocent kids." So Alberto texts Nathaniel and said, "Look, whatever's going on between you and my wife has to stop. People are threatening my family, and she's done this before. She's not going to leave her family. And someone's threatening my children over this, so it stops now." Alberto tells Zoraida, "Whatever you're doing with Nathaniel has to stop. These people are threatening our family," and she agrees. Then the Bulgarian woman tells Nathaniel, "If you want to be a part of this mafia, you're going to have to be faithful to your fiancée Linda, have more schmegs with her, be good to her, and cut Zoraida off, block her." So he blocks Zoraida on everything without an explanation, and they did not talk again after that. And even after the affair is over, someone keeps texting them about the affair and just won't leave them alone about it. Then the Bulgarian woman introduces Nathaniel to a few other accounts, claiming they're also connected to the mob. They're all going to help him work his way up in the mafia so he too can be a high-ranking crime boss. They talked online a lot, but they never talked on the phone, on FaceTime, or in person. But then things take a turn for the worst on September 14th, 2023, when the Bulgarian woman tells Nathaniel, "I now know who your stalker is. It's Zoraida, and she's going to out you to the police if you don't stop her. She's going to tell the police everything we planned, your weapons, the money, the drugs, the hitman, the mafia, everything. You know what you have to do. You got to kill her. But not just her. You got to unalive her family too, including her kids." Mind you, Nathaniel has never met the Bulgarian woman, Ingrid, Fernando, none of these people. He don't even know that they're real. But y'all, believe it or not, he started planning their murder. So the Bulgarian woman and the other accounts tell Nathaniel they're going to help him plan this murder and get away with it step by step. These accounts start giving Nathaniel personal information on Zoraida and her family, and by the end of the night, Nathaniel and all these accounts had created a plan to take Zoraida and her family out. So around 3:40 a.m., Nathaniel has his fiancée Linda drive him over to Zoraida and Alberto's home. Linda waits in the car. Nathaniel starts making his way to the bedroom, but before he can get there, Alberto wakes up from all the dogs barking. Alberto comes out, and now he's face to face with this man, Nathaniel, holding a weapon, so Alberto takes off running back to his family. Unfortunately, he never makes it there. Nathaniel shot him multiple times, killing him on the spot. Then Nathaniel makes his way into the bedroom where he finds Zoraida and her 2 children sitting on the bed. They're awake from all the commotion, and he shoots Zoraida and then murders her 2 children. As Nathaniel is leaving their home, he kills 2 of their dogs, and then he and Linda flee the scene. So 3 days later, on September 17th, their families called the police to have a welfare check done, and that was where they found the bodies of Zoraida, Alberto, their 2 children, and their dogs. The police can tell this is not a robbery gone bad because no money, jewelry, or electronics had been taken, and 2 children were murdered, which is not typical, so they interviewed Zoraida and Alberto's family and co-workers. That's where they learned that Nathaniel and Zoraida had been involved in an affair for a short time. So the police go to Nathaniel to question him, and he says, "I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't talked to that girl in a long time." So the police ask if they can search his vehicles, and Nathaniel says no. Then they ask if they can download his phone to see where it pinged that night or when the last time he talked to Zoraida was, and he said no. The police said, "Look, we're trying to help you by clearing your name as fast as possible," but Nathaniel refused. Then the police go to their home to question Linda, where she's acting very upset. Police said, "Look, we already know about the threatening messages that Alberto and Zoraida received before they were murdered. Are we going to find out you had something to do with that?" And Linda said no. Linda's telling everyone, "Look, I got 5 kids, 5 grandkids. I would never do that to children. I don't know what's going on, but I didn't have nothing to do with this crime. Because Nathaniel has a history of domestic violence, the police think that she knows more about this crime, but she's too afraid to talk. But Linda says nope, he's not involved, and she even gives him an alibi. But we know that she's lying because she doesn't want the police to find out that she was his getaway driver. So the police interview Linda again without Nathaniel, and this time she seems even more afraid. And even though she's acting so scared, she's still defending Nathaniel, saying he's innocent, he had nothing to do with this. Then the police learn that the very next day, Nathaniel and Linda went to meet up with Nathaniel's mother, where he confessed he told his mother that he had to kill Zoraida, her husband, and children because people were after him if he didn't. Then he tells his mom that those kids didn't need Alberto and Zoraida for parents anyways, like that somehow justifies his actions. Then the police learn that the pair went on the run, and they're very concerned for Linda's safety because they know Nathaniel is unstable and they're afraid he might kill Linda. They finally find Nathaniel and Linda at a store, but before they can get to them, they jump in the car and take off, and now they're in a high-speed police chase. Nathaniel is driving erratically all over the road, hitting very high speeds, and the police are scared to death they're not going to get to Linda in time. Before they knew it, the car crashed, and when the police pulled up, they found Linda with a bullet wound in her head, and Nathaniel had one in his own head, and he was holding the gun. Nathaniel had shot Linda and then himself, and that was why the car wrecked. So the police, their families, and the community were all blaming themselves, like, we could have saved her. We failed Linda. That is until a few months later, when Nathaniel and Linda's phones had finally been processed. Y'all, this story is about to take a very crazy turn. It turns out the entire time, Linda was behind all the fake accounts. The Bulgarian woman, Turtle, the hitman, Fernando, Ingrid, all of them. She was a stalker who was threatening Nathaniel, Alberto, Zoraida, and herself. So Linda creates all these fake accounts, including the Bulgarian woman, and she downloads spyware so she can trace Nathaniel's whereabouts, and that was how she knew where he was, who he was talking to, and what he was doing. And why did she do all of this? Because she thought it would make Nathaniel stop cheating on her. Instead of breaking up with him or leaving him, she pushed him to kill an entire family and got herself killed in the process, out of jealousy. She wanted Zoraida dead because she was the most jealous of her out of all the women that he was seeing, even though the affair was over. And Nathaniel, instead of saying, no, I'm not killing anyone, and reporting it to the police, he goes along with it because he wants to be a part of the mob so bad. She knew he had an infatuation with firearms and the mafia, and that was why she conjured up this entire story. But let's not forget, while Linda may be guilty, Nathaniel is the one who pulled the trigger, and he could have said no at any point in time. He did not have to do this. Now, a lot of people think that right on up until their deaths, Nathaniel thought Zoraida was the one behind all of this, when it was actually his fiancée Linda, and he had no idea. Or maybe Linda finally told him the truth during the police chase, and that made him angry, so he killed her and himself because he knew they were caught either way. And y'all gotta stop believing these fake accounts. If you can't talk to them in person, they're not real. Block them. People gotta learn to walk away. If your partner's cheating on you or you're jealous, that don't give you the right to kill an entire family, especially two innocent children.
Have you seen this video? We are getting reports that your son has been found in your basement. Yeah. Son? Mr. Bothell, are you
what?
Your son has been found alive in your base.
What? This father went on national television to beg the public for help to find his 12-year-old missing son. And this was his reaction when they found his child in his basement. Oh, man. Let me back up first. It's June 2014 in Detroit, Michigan, and 12-year-old Charlie Bothell is living with his dad, Charles, and his stepmother, Monica. And from the outside, this looks like a pretty regular household. Like, they've got a dad, stepmom, young kids. Normal enough that you would not think twice about it if you drove past them. But inside that house, Charlie's life is basically a prison sentence that nobody knows about. Charles and Monique had made it so that Charlie basically doesn't even exist outside those walls. He doesn't go outside unless it's for something like school, a controlled trip to the grocery store, and he had no friends, no play dates, no riding around the block. Nothing that a 12-year-old kid should get to do. And you can sort of picture what that does to a kid over time, right? Like, the world just shrinks. The walls in the house become the walls of the world. And the people inside that house become the only people who matter, which means that whatever those people say is real becomes real, because there is no one else to tell him otherwise. And then on top of all of that isolation, Charles and Monique have built this punishment system around Charles that is just, I don't know. I mean, it's even hard to describe. Every single day, Charlie is required to complete these exercise routines. 100 push-ups, 200 sit-ups, 100 jumping jacks. I don't know the exact number, but they're extreme. And these are not optional. These are not, hey, kid, let's stay active. This is a 12-year-old being forced through physical training that would make a grown man's muscles give out. And if he doesn't do them well enough, if his form isn't right, or if he looks too slow, or he looks like he's not trying hard enough, he has to start the entire thing over from the beginning. And if he still doesn't perform it to their standards after that, they just don't feed him. Like, that's the system. Exercise until your body can't do it anymore. And if you fail, you don't eat. At 12 years old, that is what he has to endure. But there's another punishment, and I really need you to picture this one. They called it reaching for excellence. And what that means in practice is Charlie standing with both of his arms raised straight above his head, held there. He's not allowed to drop them for extended periods of time until his shoulders are burning and his arms are shaking and every muscle from his fingertips to his ribs is screaming to just let them fall. But if he even tries to drop them, or if he makes his dad angry, Charles hits him with a PVC pipe on his body multiple times. And I just, like, what is the point of that? Like, what is the goal? Please tell me. What 12-year-old child is supposed to learn something from that? It makes no sense. That's not discipline. It's not parenting. It is just cruelty with a name on it. So on Sunday, before all of this becomes public, Monique decides that Charlie hasn't completed his exercise routine to her satisfaction. And rather than, I don't know, saying, okay, buddy, you look tired, let's just call it for today, like a normal human being, she grabs him and drags him down to the basement. She walks him over to a spot behind a big stack of boxes. She points at it and tells him to get back there. And then she leans in close to this 12-year-old kid and she tells him to shut up, not to move, don't do anything. And if he didn't listen, then she could make him disappear with her sharp knives. And so Charlie does what she says. He goes behind the boxes, he sits down, and he stays quiet and doesn't move. Now, I don't know exactly what was going through Charles and Monique's head over the next couple of days, but by June 16th, it seems like Charles kind of starts to realize that people are going to begin wondering where Charlie is. Like, at some point, somebody is going to notice that this kid hasn't shown up to school. He hasn't been seen around the neighborhood. He hasn't been anywhere, honestly. And questions are going to start getting asked that Charlie doesn't really want to answer. And so Charlie picks up the phone and he calls the Detroit police himself. He tells them that he doesn't know where his son is, but the last time he saw him was at home, that Charlie is just gone and he needs help finding him. Meanwhile, Charlie is underneath their feet in the basement behind a stack of dirty boxes, confused and scared, probably wondering why the two people in the world who are supposed to care for him and love him have decided to do this instead. I honestly feel like this is the part of the story that sits with me the most. Like, it's just so hard to comprehend. On June 17th, Detroit police officially announced that a 12-year-old boy named Charlie Bothell is missing, and they need the public's help in finding him. And that kicks off this massive search. I'm talking Detroit PD, the FBI, the community. Everybody is out looking for this kid because, it's a 12-year-old boy who vanished from his own home. That's every parent's worst nightmare, and people want to help. So over the next several days, they search that entire block. They go through every single corner of that neighborhood. They search the family's townhouse. They even bring dogs into the basement, the very basement where Charlie is hiding behind a stack of boxes. But for some reason, they find absolutely nothing. And I still don't fully understand how that happened. How do you bring a search dog into a basement where a living child is sitting behind some cardboard boxes and still come up empty? I don't know, but they did. And so now the police are starting to feel stuck. They search everywhere they can think of, and the only direction their gut keeps pointing towards is Charles. Because from the moment he called the station, there has been this weird, guilty energy around him that the officers just can't shake. This sort of aroma of guilt that's just hovering in the air around everything he says and does. Like, the way he's acting doesn't match "my son is missing, please help me." It's off. Something about it is just off. And as police officers, they're trained to pick up on that gut feeling of this person isn't acting right. It's not something that they just ignore. So they decide to act on it. They make Charles take a polygraph, and the results came back inconclusive, which, it doesn't prove anything on its own, but it also doesn't clear him. And it definitely doesn't make the cops feel any better about the situation. And then on June 25th, something happens that I genuinely think is one of the most insane moments I have ever seen on live television. So Charles is sitting in a studio doing a live interview with Nancy Grace. And he's on camera looking like a sad little puppy who just got his toy taken. And while he's sitting there ready to tell the world how sad he's been, how badly he wants his boy back, Nancy Grace gets a call and she reads it out loud. She tells Charles on camera that police have just found a boy matching Charlie's description in the basement of his family's townhouse. And the look on this man's face, he starts stammering and his eyes kind of go wide, but not in the right way. It's more like the kind of look of somebody whose brain is spinning bad because the thing they thought they had just hidden got pulled out into the light on live television. And he starts saying things like, but we already checked the basement. Law enforcement already searched down there. And it's like, sir, your son was just found alive after being missing for 11 days. Why is your first reaction to explain why he shouldn't be there instead of, I don't know, being happy that he's found? He clearly did not practice his reaction good enough. When officers went into the basement that day, what they found was a child crouched behind a makeshift barricade of boxes. And when they got closer, they pretty quickly realized that the child was Charlie. And they approached him very carefully, very gently, saying something like, "Hey, Charlie, it's the police, bud. Are you okay?" And after a few minutes, Charlie stood up and he walked over to them. But what they saw when he stepped out from behind those boxes turned this entire case around. Because Charlie was severely underweight. He's got marks all over his body. And he didn't have the face of a kid who ran away from home and hid in the basement for fun. This is a child who has been hurt systematically over a long period of time by the people who were supposed to be raising him. And so without any hesitation, the police take Charlie straight to the hospital. And when he's finally released, he runs straight into the arms of his biological mother. Because by this point, Charles and Monique are both in handcuffs and are being questioned by detectives who now understand that this missing child case they've been working on for almost 2 weeks was never a missing child case at all. Now, here's where this story turns into something that honestly just makes me want to Monique, the woman who dragged a 12-year-old kid into a basement and threatened to cut him with kitchen knives, she already had a probation violation on her record. And within 1 day of being arrested, she gets a personal bond and goes home with nothing but an ankle monitor. And as long as she stays out of trouble for the next 6 months, that her record will get wiped clean. 6 months for what she did to that child. I just don't get it. And then in January of 2016, a full year and a half later, Charles finally stands in front of a judge and admits out loud in a courtroom that yes, he kidnapped his own son. He held him hostage in his basement and he struck him with plastic pipes multiple times if he didn't perform. And after hearing this, the court sentences him to 18 months of probation and some anger management classes. 18 months of probation. Am I the only one who was shocked and disappointed here? I mean, he did also lose custody of Charlie, which I suppose is the only outcome of this entire thing that actually kind of makes sense. So he went on to live with his biological mother. I don't know what his life looks like right now, honestly, but that might just be how he would want it. That is all for today. And Charlie, if you ever come across this, I truly hope that you are living a much happier, much fulfilling life. Group hug.